For me, the idea came from my own passions. I love bike riding, I love looking at maps. I came to this area, looked at the maps and thought, wow, this has great riding potential here, and then we went out and started exploring the new area after we'd moved in here about 6 years ago. And I thought, yes, these roads are just brilliant. It's just asking for people to come and ride on it. That then became linked for me personally to the recognition that there was nobody visiting these areas, and as a whole this area seemed really undervalued as a beautiful resource, for its natural and beautiful resources, and that seemed to me a real deficiency, particularly in a town that really needs new directions. The
local community was in a state of socio-economic decline, or sort of wondering where they were heading in an identity sense, and then the Wilderness Bike Ride came about by one or two local community members who thought this would be a good idea to promote the region. The
first event that we ran in 2004 was called the Errinundra Snowy. It was a 4-day ride, and it covered a total distance of 210 kilometres. So the daily distance that people rode was from 30 kilometres to a longer stay of about 70 kilometres. People arrived in Orbost with their bikes, and we put their bikes on a cattle truck and put them on buses, and we trucked them 2 hours drive to a starting point, and then they rode down off the plateau on a spectacular 18-kilometre downhill run, which they just loved. And they ended up in a little valley called Combine Bar, and we camped there in a paddock overnight. And then they rode through more forest, a bit more rainforesty stuff, over to the coast, and we spent then another night at Bem River. And then the final day of the ride, they rode back through the coastal forest. They went back down, came to Cape Conran, and then back along the road to Marlow, to where the mouth of the Snowy River is, and then they followed the river back up into Orbost.
It is a fantastic, fantastic ride, and we've got people from all over Australia. We've had some overseas people who found out about the ride, and they came and were involved, and they're coming back.
I think the Wilderness Bike Ride demonstrates to us as a community and to Parks Victoria as an organisation that, with the idea from one person and the energy and the enthusiasm to provide that spark, if you like, that there are other people out there who will come on board, and with the right guidance and direction we can support those sort of people.
It was positive naivety. Naivety because none of us who were involved in the planning had done anything quite like that before. But positive because we all just thought, this is a goer, this can work. And I think when you get enough people saying that all together, you go, oh well, if they think it'll work, it really must work. And so you create a spirit of mutual encouragement. And I think that's what really fed us and kept it going, is that just this general conviction that this was a workable idea, it could really happen.
If you've got a couple of really good communicators in your group, and you've got the enthusiasm not only with them but their supporters, and they go out into the community, run a few community meetings and stuff, it seemed to work well.
A critical first step was finding people in those communities who were interested in the ride, finding a key lead person, and they just turned up. That sounds a bit naive. In our first original call to the community saying we're doing this ride, particularly for a couple of the towns north of Orbost, there was one couple that were really excited and really passionate about the ride, and they became our liaison with those towns.
I think with the initial meetings there was a lot of enthusiasm from the community, but as time wore on, because it took so long to get organised, I don't think people realised what was really involved in getting it up and running. Their enthusiasm started to wane, and you really need to gee people along.
There were a lot of challenges. We, I think as a group, struggled to come to terms with just what exactly this meant. How were we going to manage this? Because being the first event of its kind, we had a bit of experience from the Great Vic Bike Ride. We've seen the logistics in terms of running that sort of an event, but the Wilderness Bike Ride, as you've said, is totally different in that it is out in rugged, remote country, poorly serviced country. So you have all sorts of issues.
Our insurance didn't finally actually come through till 3 weeks before the event. You just have to take a risk that it's all going to happen. We were receiving assurances from the broker that it was likely that it was going to be doable. He gave us a figure that we needed to budget on being a likely figure that what it was going to cost us. But nothing was concrete till three weeks before the event. That you just take your chances and go, we're going to give it a go. Either we pull out now because it's all just too hard, or we go, okay, what the heck, let's risk it, let's get in, give it a go, which is what we did, and it worked.
Well, the first few days after, people were really tired. It's a bit more demanding than I think what we initially thought it was. Well, what we thought it was going to be, because it wasn't a matter of do a 6-hour ride and then that was it. It was managing the campsites, managing the people, looking after, really mollycoddling some people along the way. So at the end of it, it was a real letdown. Whew, that's over and done with. What are we going to do next? Do we really want to do it again?
It is tiring. It's a big draw on people's resources. They're out there as volunteers. It's a big ask on people's time and energy. But interestingly enough, you know, the riders were saying to us this year, you know, where are we going to go next year? And there was lots of commitment and enthusiasm from the participants. And it was interesting to see that on the third day of the ride this year, people from the community were already pulling maps out, putting them on the bonnets of the car, planning next year's ride. So I think we'll keep going for a long time yet.
This particular idea was the idea of a bike ride. Bike ride is something that people understand. They've seen big bike events. The Great Victorian Bike Ride once came through this town. They understand what it means. They could also clearly understand the need. This idea was at the right time and the right place for this town. At a different time and place, it wouldn't come about. But people clearly themselves felt the need, and so they could see that this idea answered that need. Because I don't think the passion alone is enough to just drive it all happen. I mean, I can talk a lot, but fast talking alone doesn't convince people. There has to be something inside them that's already, that the idea is going to resonate with, and that's what makes them step forward.